Good morning to all who have joined with us. I am Dr. Snehashish Burman, Secretary of AY West Bengal. Today, Professor J.C. Pasi will deliver the most prestigious oration, Dr. Satyavan Roy Memorial Oration, organized by AY West Bengal. You all know that the COVID cases are rising again in many states of India and other countries. In this situation, we could not organize the 49th annual conference of AY West Bengal physically. For this reason, we are here to organize Dr. Satyavan Roy Memorial Oration on digital platform today. I thank Professor J.C. Pasi for accepting our invitation to deliver the oration, and I thank all the audiences for being with us today. I am sure you will enjoy the oration. Without wasting much time, I request Dr. Shubhajit Banerjee, our beloved president, to say a few words on legendary Dr. Satyavan Roy.
Okay, thank you. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah. Good morning, everybody. On behalf of AY West Bengal, I welcome you all to this prestigious Professor Dr. Satyavan Roy Memorial Oration to be delivered by Professor Dr. J.C. Pasi. Now, I have the proud privilege to say a few words about Professor Satyavan Roy. He was a leading personality in ENT in his time. He had done MSc, MB, DLO London, and FRCS Edinburgh. He was one of the earliest FRCS in India and was a classmate of Professor Dr. Cawthron. He served as head of ENT at Calcutta Medical College and Hospital and also at Chittaranjan Cancer Hospital, Calcutta. He was a resident of Uluberia of Howrah district and was elected an MP in 1952. He was also the president of AOI in 1952. Sir used to love gardening. Dr. Satyavan Roy Memorial Oration was started by Dr. S.K. Nath Chaudhary in the year 1973, and Major Dr. K.K. Ghosh was the first orator. That time, it was decided that henceforth, this oration was to be delivered by speakers living outside of West Bengal. I now pass on to our beloved treasurer and trustee board member, Professor Dr. Doipan Mukherjee, to say a few words. Over to Doipan.
Thanks to Dr. Snehashish Burman, our secretary, and Dr. Shubhajit Banerjee, our president. Right now, I am introducing today's editor, Dr. J.C. Pasi. Sir is Director Professor in the Department of ENT, Maulana Azad Medical College, New Delhi. He Honorary Consultant, ENT Department, Chacha Nehru Bal Chikitsalaya, New Delhi. Officer in Charge, Cochlear Implantation Program, Lok Nayak Hospital and Chacha Nehru Bal Chikitsalaya. Officer in Charge, State of Art Temporal Bone Dissection Lab, and he has trained more than 1,000 ENT surgeons with hands-on exercise on wet temporal bone. He is mentor to various institutions for cochlear implantation program, former HOD, Department of ENT, Maulana Azad Medical College, New Delhi, former Medical Director, Lok Nayak Hospital, New Delhi, with additional charge of Dean, Maulana Azad Medical College, New Delhi, and Director, GB Pant Hospital, New Delhi. Former President, Honorary Secretary and Treasurer, Delhi AOI, past President of All India Rhinology Society, past President of Neuro Equilibrium Society, advisor to UPSC and various other public service commissions, assessor in National Medical Commission and DNB Board, organized several international and national workshops, seminars, and conferences, and he has delivered various orations in different parts of the country. Thank you, sir, for accepting our invitation. Now, over to Dr. J.C. Pasi.
Hello, good morning, everyone, and my sincere thanks to all the organizers, including Dr. Banerjee, Dr. Mukherjee, Dr. Burman, Dr. Amitabh Roy Chaudhary, for giving me this opportunity for the great oration after the name of the great ENT surgeons of West Bengal, Dr. Satyendra Roy. And I really feel humbled by by my presence, by the love and affection shown by the executive members of West Bengal AOI, and I will like to speak on the subject of my choice, which is otology. And today I thought we have been working on cochlear implantation for many years now. Now is the time for treating complications of cochlear implantation, including reimplantation. So without wasting time, I'll go to the topic straight away. Yeah. Am I audible to all?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Is my volume adequate?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, a lot of good things have been said about me by Dr. Dwaipan, but this is true that I have established state-of-art temporal bone lab in my department, but because of my administrative responsibilities, I could not continue in the past few years now, but now it is again ready to be started in my department, and we'll be holding regular temporal bone hands-on exercises for everyone in the country, and we will be sending you invitations in near future. So as I said, we have been doing cochlear implantation for many years now, and there are cases who are 15 years, 16 years, 17 years old after cochlear implantation, and many of them develop problems, and many of them need reimplantation surgery. So reimplantation surgery is technically very difficult. So, but we don't have to give up because the beginning is always the hardest. Once you begin, then the things start improving, things start becoming easy. A few words about the history of reimplantation. The first reimplantation was reported in 1985 when we did not even start the cochlear implantation program. But this was Dr. Hoshner, Dozier, and Burian in 1985 who did the first reimplantation. In 1989, Gantz et al. They did surgery on 5 patients successfully, and these all 5 patients were from different. The implants were from the different companies. In the 90s, the 3 gentlemen, Lindman, Schut, and Econom et al. Reported replacement of a single channel house implant with a nucleus 22 channel implant. This is called the upgrading of the implant. Initially, we all know that there was a single channel cochlear implant to start with, and it was definitely an advancement in the field of cochlear implantation that today we have 24 channel implants available with most of the companies. And the ones who have been done with single or double channel implants in the past need to be upgraded. So this is one more indication of the implantation, the upgradation of the implant. So in all their experiences, all the otologists, they found either results are better or at least the similar results when they did reimplantation surgery. Now, what is the incidence of revision surgery? How many cases, say if you operate 100 cases, 5 to 10 of them, it's a large percentage which is probably underdiagnosed condition. We should know that there is a very good number of people who will need a revision surgery, which is commonest in pediatric population because of the fact that there is a growth of the skull as the age advances, and there is a much higher incidence of local trauma. This trauma can be a result of peer groups in the school, on the playgrounds, within the house, within the siblings, and accidental traumas, which will damage the implant. So, children are not expected to take care of their implants to the extent the adults are expected. So, there are chances of problems more in the pediatric population. Though cochlear implantation is a safe and effective method of rehabilitation, but these devices are subjected to damage, as I said, breakdown, need upgradation, and there are device failures. In such cases, the reimplantation is necessary. Diagnosis of a device failure, whether the device is functioning or not, is a challenging task in very young children because they are not likely to express the changes in the hearing perception. They, up to the age of 3 to 4 years, the children, suppose someone was implanted at the age of 1 year, if there are problems in the device, we do not expect that child to tell us that he is feeling a problem till the child attains the age of 4 years plus. But in the hands of the experienced surgeons, the parents, and the AVT trainer, we can find out that there is some problem in the device. Suspected findings, which we generally see on imaging, in such cases, whenever we suspect something wrong is happening with the device, the cause can be the ossification of the cochleostomy site, the mastoid fibrosis, in which the redundant electrodes are lying in the mastoid cavity, and fibrous or bony obstruction of the scala tympani due to the growth of the child. If the insertion of the electrode array had not been a smooth one, so there can be some trauma within the scala tympani at the time of first surgery, which can turn into a fibrous tissue or can overgrow as a bony overgrowth, causing obstruction to the scala tympani. So these are the suspected causes of device failure. Now we can divide the indications of reimplantation into two. The ones which are device related, these form the bulk of the cases. About 75% of the cases of reimplantation are done due to device failure. And there are other conditions in which device is not the issue. There are other issues. In device related cases, the device failure can happen with the hard receiver stimulator or the soft part of it, and we can also need reimplantation for upgradation of the old device, and the facial nerve stimulation is also one of the reasons for reimplantation. Similarly, non-device related causes are scalp infection. Scalp infection includes infection of the skin, infection in the form of biofilm around the receiver stimulator, or there can be local infections which can be the cause of extrusion of the receiver stimulator, the inner component of the cochlear implant. And there can be other causes like electrode extrusion, electrode misplacement, or the magnet displacement. We'll come to each one of these situations one by one. Now, device related failures form about 3% of the cases who are implanted, and this can be due to hard failure, this can be due to soft failure. The hard failure leads to complete malformation. Whenever we have complete malfunction or abnormal performance of the device, we can confirm it with device analysis report. We send some reports to the company, and these people, they do a DR analysis, and then only, like in the recent past, whatever cases I did, the one which I am going to show in the video film was my last case, whose DR is still awaited. The device has been explanted and sent for device analysis report to the company, which is still awaited. hard failure, device failure is confirmed only after DAR analysis. Similarly, soft failure we can only suspect, because in these cases both integrity testing and DAR are not able to establish device malfunction. But the patient's performance improves after revision cochlear implant, RCI. What we find in soft failure that on testing DAR etc. or integrity testing, we do not find anything wrong with the hard part of the device. But when we decide to explant and re-implant, we find the performance improves. So this leads us to believe about the soft failure. Then there is a term called hermeticity failure. We know that there is a seal which prevents any ingress of gas or water molecules to the electronics package. You cannot allow any water molecules or gaseous substance to enter into the electronics package of the receiver stimulator, the inner component of the cochlear implant. And if it is breached, then we call it hermeticity failure, and this can lead on to device failure. Similarly, insulation failure is just like hermeticity failure. There is a breach in the outer silicon insulation. There is a silicon insulation which prevents fluid to ingress to the electrode wiring outside the hermetic cavity. So this is another way of device failure, but this does not impact the hermeticity of the device, though the device does not function well in insulation failure as well. Now, this is a study of the International Tinnitus Journal in 2018, in which they found out the causes and how to suspect malfunctioning of the cochlear implant, and how to decide that these patients, especially the children, will need a revision surgery. So they have categorized like ABC. One is behavioral, another is teachers, therapist concern, third is the other factor. So when there is a malfunction of the device, we can suspect when the child has some increase in the bad behavior, the child becomes aggressive, unwilling to wear device because the child is not comfortable wearing it, inattentiveness, regression in speech and language, intermittent responsiveness, and frequent appearance of being off task. So you will find some change in the behavior of the child, which should lead on to suspect you for some problem in the functioning of the device. Similarly, from the therapist point of view, they will observe there is a deterioration in the school performance, there is a plateau in performance, no improvement, there is a failure to meet appropriate expectations, and there is the placement is not up to the mark. Other factors include type and amount of therapy, familiar involvement, puberty, and atypical tinnitus. These are the various things that we collectively observe and find out to know that there is some problem in the functioning of the device. Similarly, if we talk about the symptomatology of from the patient side, auditory symptomatology, so if the child is grown up enough, can complain of buzzing sounds, roaring, engine-like noise in the ear, static popping, pain over the implant site, pain down into the neck, and there is itching, there is facial stimulation, there is sudden drop in performance. Performance is a big issue, decrease in the performance over time, failure to meet expected performance, intermittent performance, change in level over time, changes in pulse width, duration, loss of channel. These are various symptoms which can make you suspect about the malfunctioning of the device. And testing also can be done. We can neural response measures. We can do evoked potential, stimulus artifacts, etc. to know about the position and the level of functioning of the device. These are the studies. There are other studies also, but this is one of a good studies which has categorized into various categories. And we can, if we follow this, we can definitely suspect and arrive at a conclusion about the possibility of malfunctioning of the device. Device survival rate from closure of incision onwards, 5 years survival is reported in 97.3 to 100% and 10-year survival in 88.2 to 100% cases. In the study, which is done on MEDAL, Cochlear and Advanced Bionic devices by this JAMA, published in JAMA, and this is done by our Southeast Asian friends. Details I will not discuss here. Now, the device upgradation is need of the hour, especially those who have been implanted long back with single channel, double channel implants. Recent advances in the cochlear implant technology, a high level of speech recognition has been achieved by multi-channel processing devices. We all know that. But there are twofold increase in the risk of injury in revision surgery. As I said, technically revision surgery is difficult. So there are critical areas like facial nerve, and of course with ocular chain disruption we don't mind, but tympanic membrane can be injured from the inner surface side, and facial nerve is at risk. So and the intracranial structures sometimes in a abnormal anatomy of the patient. But then for upgradation, the various factors to be considered are we have to weigh the benefit, risk and benefit ratio, affordability on the part of the parents of the patient, and if we are, can we give good post-operative results. Facial nerve stimulation, though it is not very common, it is there are not many studies, but some studies have said even 15%, up to 15% facial nerve stimulation can be there, 1 to 15%. And most common cause is said to be otosclerosis involving OT capsule, which surrounds the electrode array and can be responsible for facial nerve stimulation. But importantly, the factors responsible for facial nerve stimulation are when the labyrinthine segment of the facial nerve is very close to the basal nerve. This will happen in an abnormal anatomical situation, or there is a leakage of current due to change in electric property of the bone. Like I said, in otosclerosis involving the OT capsule, there is a change in the property of bone. So this can lead on to leakage of current and subsequently facial nerve stimulation. Or if there is malfunctioning of the or the malformation of the area where the cochleostomy has been done and electrode array has been put, and you need a high current to stimulate. I mean, high current is required to see to ensure that the device is functioning. That can lead on to stimulation of the nerve. And the simple symptom that comes is the twitching of the face or the facial pain. So this is a very irritating symptom, and this it must not be, overlooked. Now there are non-device related conditions like infection of the scalp, infection in the brain, meningitis, or chronic suppurative otitis media. So all of you will agree with me that chronic suppurative otitis media still happens to be the commonest infective condition of the middle ear cleft, and total infection put together form 2 to 8% of cochlear implantees, and chronic suppurative otitis media is the commonest, and a child who is wearing a cochlear implant, having a CSOM, developed CSOM later on in life, this can be a real troublesome situation for the operating surgeon. But we have to manage CSOM. We have to give top priority for the management. Similarly, there is extrusion of the internal device due to scalp infection that I told you. In this, we remove the device or we move to a different location. We can put the receiver stimulator close to the previous position, but away from the site of local infection. And generally, we take the help of our plastic surgeon friends for reconstruction of the defect, which can be done in single stage or 2 stages. And in chronic otitis media, we have to do a radical procedure because we are not asking the middle ear to function for conduction of sound waves. That function is already not happening and it is being taken over by the cochlear implant device. So we can do a canal wall down procedure with the eustachian tube occlusion, extremity canal closure, and mastoid augmentation. Means a radical mastoidectomy even can be done, though not in all cases. Not in all cases. If it is a small perforation, you can close down, but sometimes the electrode is not nicely placed inside the cochleostomy site. We can have the electrodes touching the inner surface, the mucosal surface of the tympanic membrane, which can over a period of time necrose and give way so that the electrode starts becoming visible through the thinned out tympanic membrane or sometimes a perforated tympanic membrane. But if it is a frank etiquental disease or even in tubotympanic CSOM, which is refractory to medical treatment, we may have to go for a radical procedure to ensure that our device failure does not happen because of this condition. Now, electrode extrusion can be cochlear, can be extracochlear. In cochlear, we have the new ossification, which can happen due to advancement of age or due to infection, and this can push the electrode out. There can be adhesions and fibrotic bands within the mastoid, which may pull the electrode bundle. Within the mastoid means I am doing all my cochlear implants with conventional method of posterior tympanostomy, in which we first have to do a extended cortical mastoidectomy, and we create a mastoid cavity in which the redundant electrodes they sit and settle in the form of a loop. And if we have the fibrotic bands or adhesions later on there within the mastoid cavity, these can pull the electrode bundle. Similarly, there can be a misplacement of the electrode. This happens in 0.2 to 5% of the cases, in which there can be rollover of the tip of the electrode array. There can be a possibility of over insertion, and there can be partial insertion. The electrode can be misplaced into eustachian tube, semicircular canal, hypotympanic cells. So these are the areas where we can misplace the electrode. And then the magnet displacement. The receiver stimulator is supposed to be fixed, but if we have not prepared a proper implant, the depth of the implant is not adequate. If we have not fixed it with our non-absorbable sutures, and if we had an accident or local trauma due to any reason, this magnet displacement happens. Now, preoperative evaluation, which is very, very important because doing a re-implantation is a very tough decision. It's a very hard decision to make, not only for the parents who will have to cough out lakhs of rupees, but for the surgeon also, because technically it is difficult and ensuring better results is more difficult. But we have to do a nice pre-operative evaluation so that we can reach a conclusion that our effort of doing surgery again will benefit the patient, and that beginning will be half done if it is well begun. We have to, in pre-operative evaluation, we have to go for nicely for psychological and behavioral evaluation of not only the patient but also of the parents. This is very important. physical examination of the child to know about the duration, the age at which the first implantation was done, and how old is the child now. And we should expect some changes on physical examination accordingly. Size of the skull grows, and there can be issues related to the fixed receiver stimulator, the inner component of the implant, because of the expansion of the skull. And if we do the X-ray, this is not a very good exercise, because the electrodes in semicircular canal can give false impression of normal placement, and it does not show if electrodes are still lying outside the cochlea. So HRCT is the answer, which will show us the electrode location, insertion depth, and post-surgical changes, if any. So there are certain investigations like impedance, NR telemetry, AR telemetry. We can find out by reprogramming and external hardware replacement. We all know that speech processor, the external component, is replaced generally after 5 years of surgery. Many speech processors need to be changed even before, after 2 years, 2.5 years, 3 years, like this, because child is not expected to behave, at that age and stage, especially in school, when he goes to school or mixes up with other siblings of the family. So there is some interference by the friend circle on the external component, and that is the commonest cause of malfunctioning of the external component. So external hardware replacement is required more frequently than 5 years. So company people say it is 5 years, it should work nicely, then you change it. But in my experience and in the experience of most of other cochlear implant surgeons, we need to change this hardware more frequently, and it also costs some lakh of rupees. But the audiologist can reprogram and put this external hardware, replace it, and ensure that now the device is functioning all right. But even if it doesn't function, which can happen in situation like labyrinthine ossification or other causes of device failure, then we have to think about the replacement. And one thing in the pre-operative evaluation is very important. As I said that technically the surgical part is difficult in reimplantation. Explantation is not very difficult, but if we have to do a reimplantation on the same side of the ear, then we have to raise the flaps accordingly, so that at the time of closure, we do not have any issues. So we have to keep the opposite ear also ready. Whenever we are doing a reimplantation, we prepare and keep the opposite side prepared and informed to the parents that we may have to switch on to the other ear if we are not able to reimplant on the same side. So consent and information to the parents and the patient should be very clear, coherent, and they should be willing, and they should be ongoing. Then only you should do a reimplantation, and this is the very important part of the pre-evaluation, pre-surgical evaluation. Now, this is one patient whom I had operated for bilateral cochlear implantation, and the patient had been doing very well. I operated this child first right side about 6 years back, and left side 5 years back. And suddenly the child started having issues, and but before he started having issues, we have just a follow-up picture of patient progress.
One ja two. Wait.
2 1 ja 2.
2 ja 4.
2 2 ja 4.
2 3 ja 6.
2 3 ja 6.
2 2 2
2 4 ja 8.
2 5 ja 10.
2 5 ja 10.
2 6 ja 12.
2 6 ja 12.
2 7 ja 14.
2 7 ja 14.
2 8 ja 16.
2 8 ja 16.
2 9 ja 18.
2 9 ja 18.
2 10 ja 20.
2 10 ja 20.
हो गया
हो गया.
So this is the mother of the child was teaching and talking to him, and this child was doing pretty well. This is one of the pictures of intraoperative. It's a nice display of structures that must be visible at the end of a standard posterior tympanotomy, in which you can see this chorda tympani nerve here in pseudostapedial joint, the stapedius tendon, and this is the rest of the incus and malleus here through the additus, and just below this oval window we should have a round window somewhere here, and we make the cochleostomy somewhere here. Now this child did pretty well till the deterioration in the performance started happening, and we decided to do a reimplantation. So what are the surgical considerations which are very important? This is the intraoperative impedance when I did the second implantation. After the second implant was put, all the channels, 24 channels are on except this 16 number 16 channel, which came up after 24 hours. We repeated the telemetry, and this happens. All the electrodes do not show green shadow all the time, but this was okay. This is the post-operative X-ray. As I said, this is the case of bilateral cochlear implantation. So left side was operated again. So whenever you you have decided to do a reimplantation, so you should take a proper consent with the guarded prognosis. Don't make high promises to the attendant of the patient. Contralateral ear implant may need to be done, has to be told to the parents, and their proper consent is to be taken. And you should not guarantee a lifetime survival of the device. These are the things which will save you from medico-legal implications later on. You must have a proper performa of consent formed, and all these points must be included in your consent. Everything should be clear in the vernacular language of the patient. In surgical procedure, when we give incision, the previous suture line will always show some scar mark. Sometimes it may not be healthy. So you have to choose a different side, either anterior or posterior to the previous line of the incision. And thickness of the flap should not be less than 3 millimeter and should not be more than 8 millimeter, because less than 3 millimeter is likely to have postoperative gaping, and more than 8 millimeter thickness of the skin may not be able to transmit information from the external component into the internal component. So in fact, some people have very thick skin, especially when you operate adult patients for cochlear implant surgery, even in first instance. We have to thin out the thick skin. Some people have very thick skin. Thick skin meaning is different in literature, but here actually it is thick, and we have to thin out the skin if it is more than 8 millimeters. we have to remove the adhesion scalpel with sharp-edged instrument will cause less damage. Inadvertent injury by drill can happen, especially when you operate a child like this. Child was operated after 6 years of surgery. So the skull is growing, the bone is also growing. There is a new osseous formation, and you have to drill out to see the electrode lying in the mastoid cavity in the previous surgery. And there can be an inadvertent injury while you are drilling. And implant removal has to be done very cautiously. There are many options when you are explanting. You can either cut the electrode at the facial recess, the posterior tympanotomy site. You remove the receiver stimulator minus the electrode by cutting the electrode at the level of the posterior tympanotomy. Or you can you can take out the whole thing and insert a dummy electrode, or you can insert a soft flexible stent of an equal size. But normally what I prefer is I take out the whole implant, including the electrode array, and put the dummy implant immediately after that, so that the soft tissue collapse, etc., which can lose the site of cochleostomy, previous cochleostomy, should not bother you. There can be a case of silicone allergy, so we can design accordingly. A non-silicone package can be designed for such a patient. It's very rare. And one thing more which is very important is to avoid damage to the implant and the cochlear neural element. We should not use monopolar. Now, this has to be told to all your sisters and your assistants that they should not keep the monopolar cautery anywhere near the operating table. Inadvertently also, we should not be using the monopolar. You can use bipolar safely, but then this is also a part of the difficulty added into the procedure of reimplantation, that you are not in a position to use monopolar cautery. So this takes more surgical time. The monopolar cautery gives you a lot immediate bloodless field, but since you do not have this luxury in reimplantation, so you should be mentally prepared to take more surgical time than the routine cases. And you must be very alert about CSF leak, pressure. So you have to do proper sealing of the cochleostomy site to avoid that. Now, new electrode insertion can be difficult in a reimplantation case, and it happens quite often. You can, if you have the laser, you can remove adhesions from the cochleostomy site prior to attempt to insert the new electrode. Or if it is not going into the scala tympani, you can try to insert into the scala vestibuli. Or if you find that the cochleostomy site, the window, the very opening has gone reduced in size, so you do a revision cochleostomy by drilling out and opening, making the wider cochleostomy with the drill, and attempt should be to insert the electrode absolutely atraumatically and soft insertion. So what I do is I generally use my fingers only to introduce the electrode into the cochleostomy, because the window size of the posterior tympanotomy is very wide, and my cochleostomy site is also always wide. I do not need the inserters for inserting the electrode array most of the time. So this is the surgical video of the procedure, just for the sake of showing one reimplantation. This is the one I would like to play for you. I have applied the incision slightly anterior to the previous scar, if you can notice. And this is a lazy S incision, the standard incision which is given in the books. These days, the stress is on this short length of the incision for snugly fitting the device. But in a revision surgery, the size of the incision should not be compromised because you will be having a lot of difficulty in elevating the flaps because of the osteo or the soft tissue integration post-operatively after first surgery. So you can see I have to use a scissor to raise the flaps. I have to use blades, and that too, this 11 number, to remove the adhesions which have been formed all around the electrode. You can see the peeping of this out of the receiver stimulator, this one, and this is the mastoid cavity. This is the electrode, and it is surrounded all by soft tissue which needs to be cut. It needs a lot of patience and precision. You should not be in a great hurry. You can see this is all fibrous tissue, all adhesions have been made which are expected. It's a normal thing. So you have to be slow. You do not have a monopolar cautery. You have only a bipolar cautery. Now you can see this is the part of the receiver stimulator. This is the electrode, and the mastoid cavity has shrunk. It is not a typical mastoid cavity that we prepare while we are doing the first surgery, but we have to ensure that we see all the electrodes, the ones which are lying inside the mastoid cavity. For that, you will have to increase the size of the mastoid cavity. You will have to drill. But right now, the soft tissue work is still going on. A V-shaped incision has been given to lift the tissue off the skull bone. You need a lot of patience, you need a lot of time, and you need to use sharp instruments, knife, to raise the soft tissue from over the receiver stimulator, and you can dislodge like this. In this case, what I found was that the size of the well has also decreased, so I had to drill out again for making the proper depth. Here I am drilling the mastoid bone to come back to the previous look of the mastoid cavity so that I can see the rest of the electrode lying inside the mastoid cavity. Because the cochlear, this posterior tympanotomy side also I will not be able to see if I do not increase the size of this mastoid cavity which has shrunk due to new bone formation. Now this is the electrode which is going towards the middle ear, but it is surrounded by this muscle tissue that we put to seal the posterior tympanotomy at the time of first surgery. So it is very important to put a soft tissue all around 360 degrees, all around the electrode at the site of the posterior tympanotomy. Right now, the electrode array is being relieved of the soft tissue with the sharp instrument. Now, this is the cochleostomy side, the previous cochleostomy side, which is being shown here. This is the electrode which is now being pulled out. It comes out nicely, but you can see the decreased size of the cochleostomy. This is the cochleostomy side previous, and the adhesions which have been formed all around it. The adhesions are being removed with the sharp instrument, which is the sickle knife, and this looks to be adequate cochleostomy side. There is a collapse of cochleostomy side due to adhesions generally, but when I inserted, I could not insert the electrode, so I had to increase the size of the cochleostomy by drilling the bone a bit in this patient. You can see this drill is being done, and now this is the depth of the well which is being increased, and due to new bone formation, this had become shallow, and this channel, this tunnel is also being created. Once again, it had obliterated. These are the burr holes you have to create to fix the implant, because this is proper fixing is important, because otherwise it can become the cause of displacement of the implant postoperatively. Now you can put the inner component and fix it. Fixing with the non-absorbable suture is very, very important. In Digisonic brand of cochlear implant, you don't need to fix, because you fix with screws under the skull. You don't need, in all other implants, you need to fix it. And now there is insertion is going on, but insertion is again hard to, I'm finding it difficult. As I said, I do not use the instrument to push the electrode inside, but here in this case, I had to use the claw to propel this electrode array inside the skeleton penile, and I was not able to push all the electrodes. 2 electrodes still remain outside, and these 2 electrodes were deactivated at the time of switch on. This is the first ring which should have been sitting here, and these are the 2 electrodes which are still out of the cochleostomy side in this case, which we have technology available to deactivate the extra channels which are outside the cochleostomy, because this is a 24 channel implant device, and 22 channels if inside the cochlea should be enough for proper function. So this is the technique. This is a small video which showed you the difficulties of a reimplantation and how to manage it. Now this is happening again. So thank you very much for giving a patient hearing, and though this is an oration in which the questions are not taken, but there would be many queries in the minds of my West Bengali NT friends. I would like to answer all those queries through telephone calls, WhatsApp messages, or email. Through email, I will love to answer all your queries. Thanks once again for the opportunity given.
Thank you, Professor Pasi. It was a wonderful deliberation. We have learned a lot of things from you, and definitely, if there is queries, we will collect it and send you for discussion later on. Now, it is our honor to facilitate you with a medal and a certificate, which will be presented to you virtually now, and which will be sent to you by post later on. I want to show the medal for you. Here it is written that Dr. Satyabhan Ray Memorial Oration, orator Dr. J.C. Pasi, and on back side it is written AY West Bengal, date 20th February 2021. Sorry.
Thank you.
And now I will read out the certificate, which will be presented to you. AY West Bengal, we the members of AY West Bengal feel proud to felicitate Professor J.C. Pasi for delivering the prestigious Dr. Satyabhan Ray Memorial Oration on topic cochlear reimplantation due to device failures, held on 20th February 2021 at 11:30 a.m. on digital platform, signed by our President, Dr. Shubhajit Banerjee. I also want to thank all the audiences who have joined us and Hope I'm sure that they have enjoyed the oration and learned a lot of things. I now request Dr. Depan Mukherjee to give the vote of thanks. Dr. Depan Mukherjee, are you there? Dr. Mukherjee, you have to unmute yourself.
Yeah, thank you, sir, for your nice deliberation. And as Dr. Snehashish Burman has already said, we will send your certificate and medal to your residential address. And now I like to request our President, Dr. Shubhajit Banerjee, do you want to say anything? Dr. Shubhajit Banerjee, please unmute yourself.
Dr. Shubhajit Banerjee, you are not audible. So this is the problem of digital platform.
I just want to share one single thing that Dr. Pyasi has to travel almost 300 kilometers very shortly. He will start within 3 or 3:30 p.m. So he was kind enough to give his consent to be present as an orator for this Dr. Shottoban Roy Memorial Oration. And from AY West Bengal, and on behalf of all the members of the AY West Bengal, we like to thank sir from bottom of our heart. Thank you, sir.
Very, very nice. It had been a very good experience. Dr. Banerjee, Dr. Mukherjee, Dr. Burman, Amitabh, I could not talk. Our good friend in Kolkata and all the seniors, senior colleagues and my dear junior ENT surgeons of the state. I wish them all the best, and especially in the forthcoming elections, all should remain well and heal the society. Thank you very much once again.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Thank you. So we conclude the oration.